Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much to the organizers for this invitation. It's a pleasure and an honor for me to be here today. I have to apologize that my voice may sound a bit like a chainsaw. I have serious cold problems, and I hope I still have some voice left before I get to the end of this short talk. So could we have the next one? So let's start right away with the first picture. So the people you see here, they're transplanting rice in a Javanese village. And it's a village that I've been visiting and studying since 1972. So I also studied the parents and some of the grandparents of these young people when they were young. Most of the people you see, this photo is from 2017, they're teenagers. They're the children of small farmers, share tenants, or landless workers. Most of them are still in secondary school, and most of them will stay in school until they're 18 years old. And this is the first generation of children in this village who have never helped their parents in the field. So what are they doing working in the fields in this picture? This is a device to keep you awake. If you stay awake till the end, I will tell you. All over the world, young people are calling governments, international organizations, corporate business and political elites to account and demanding urgent action against climate breakdown. As I think we all should realize, even if nobody likes to say it, serious progress on climate crisis is unlikely to happen so long as we still judge a nation's and a government's performance by its rate of economic growth. And if we're talking about sustainable development goals and strengthening them, this in my view is one area in which the sustainable development goals are in serious need of strengthening because they also have not understood this fact. And it's embarrassing to me, as a member of the older generation, that it takes a 16-year-old Swedish girl to go on strike and refuse to go to school to remind us all of this fact. So in this context, I'd like to consider what role might rural young people play in a future agriculture that's more earth-friendly, more sustainable, and based on fulfilling society's needs rather than corporate profits or the search for growth. It's actually hard to envision agricultural futures and the possible place of young people within them with any degree of certainty in this Southeast Asian region or in any part of the world. The future will depend partly on what we do about climate change and on the adaptive capacities of farming systems. But they will also depend on the outcome of the battle for the future of farming. That's the ongoing struggle for control of land, farming and agri-food chains between different modes, different scales and different principles of farming. At one extreme we see the advance of corporate, industrial, energy-intensive, monocrop, earth-warming agriculture and linked agri-food chains. We see this all over the Southeast Asian region. At the other extreme, visions of re-peasantization envision the support and the growth of small-scale farming alternatives, not always clearly defined, but based on more ecologically rational and socially just systems of food production and farm-to-consumer networks, which their proponents claim can effectively feed the world's growing population. In fact, it's not only idealists, but also a number of authoritative international scientific studies which support this claim about the environmental, economic, and social superiority of smallholder farming. Next slide, please. One of these was the report of the International Assessment of Agricultural Knowledge, Science and Technology for Development, which drew on the expertise of about 400 specialists from all over the world. In this report, they show quite clearly that large-scale corporate agriculture and industrial monocultures must be reconsidered in favor of agroecosystems that combine mixed crop production with conserving water supply, preserving biodiversity, and improving livelihoods of the poor in small-scale farming systems. And further support comes from 3 important reports by the FAO Committee on Food Security. 3 high-level panels of experts have produced reports with similar conclusions in 2011, 2013, and 2019. And next slide, please. And then most recently, just in May this year, the FAO and IFAD, that's the 2 UN organizations responsible for thinking about agriculture, they launched the United Nations Decade of Family Farming, 2019 to 2028. Family farming, according to the FAO, is still the predominant form of food and agricultural production in both developed and developing countries. It produces 80% of the world's food in value terms on only 50% of the world's farmland, and they claim it can contribute not just to some, but to all 17 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. All of the reports that I mentioned concur on these 3 things. First, there is no crop, including oil palm, that cannot be cultivated effectively, efficiently, and sustainable on smallholder farm units. Secondly, that per hectare yields of all crops are generally higher on smallholder farms than on large industrial farms. And thirdly, that family farms produce much better outcomes in terms of food security and nutrition, community development, and environmental sustainability. So according to the FAO, then, and I quote, "Putting family farming and all family-based production models at the focus of our interventions will contribute to a world free of hunger and poverty, where natural resources are managed sustainably and where no one is left behind." Unfortunately, governments in both the South and the North have been putting the focus of their interventions elsewhere since the 1980s. Within the family of United Nations organizations, and at national level in many countries, we see many contradictory policies towards smallholder farming. On the one hand, there is a rhetoric, and sometimes laws and regulations, that call for the support and the protection of smallholders. But these are not implemented. And on the other hand, we see the chronic neglect of smallholder farming and policies that threaten its very existence. None of the documents about the United Nations Decade of Family Farming mention the threat to smallholder farming caused by the march of large-scale capital, acquiring huge areas of land, replacing smallholder farmers with earth-warming industrial agriculture, and also increasingly dominating the upstream and the downstream points in agri-food chains, where increasing proportions of value added are captured. This threat is like the elephant in the room, which everyone knows is there, but nobody wants to talk about. If the advantages of smallholder farming over industrial farming are so obvious, why are governments withdrawing more and more from their role in supporting small farmers and rural development generally, and giving free rein to large-scale agribusiness? The answer to this question, which I think should be at the heart of debates on sustainable agricultural futures in the region, will be found somewhere in the relationships between political elites, domestic conglomerates, and multinationals, and some misguided agronomists and agricultural economists who wrongly think that bigger must be better. To revitalize smallholder farming means finding ways to reverse these trends. But it also depends on the emergence of a generation of young men and women interested in becoming farmers in the future. So the rest of my talk is focused on this generational problem, but I think it's important not to forget the other threats that I have just mentioned. There is, it seems, a looming threat to generational sustainability of smallholder farming as farmers become older and young people increasingly turn away from farming. Will there be a next generation of smallholder farmers? Or will smallholder farming be so unattractive to the next generation that they will abandon it, leaving big capital and multinationals to take over? Next slide, please. Well, in the Southeast Asian region and almost all over the world, farmers are indeed getting older. I've just taken two examples from the Asia-Pacific region, two countries with totally different agricultural systems. And you'll see, over a period of 30 years, that's about one generation, in a single generation, there's been a halving in the proportion of farmheads under 35 years of age, and a doubling of those over 55. Now, how do we explain this? The most common explanation says that farmers' sons and daughters are reluctant to take over the farm, so that the older farmers have to continue farming into their old age. But it can also be because farmers are now living longer, staying healthier longer, and unwilling or unable to hand over the farm to the next generation, so that the young generation have to wait longer and longer before getting their share of the property. So, are the old unable to stop because the young are unwilling to start? Or are the young unable to start because the old are unable or unwilling to stop? Or is there something more complex at work, as Jonathan Rigg and his colleagues have recently argued based on their research in villages in Thailand, which mean that we have to reconsider the whole way in which you think about what is a farm, what is a farmer, and what is a farm household in the world today. What do we know about the situation of rural young men and women today, and how they envisage, how they think about their futures? Well, recently I reviewed 5 multi-country surveys of young rural men and women's aspirations, which cover more than 40 countries in Asia, Africa, Latin America. All of these studies conclude that young rural people overwhelmingly express an aspiration for secure, formal sector jobs. They want to have a job with a salary, blue or white collar job. And certainly, today's rural youth have wider horizons than their parents and grandparents did. But it's actually quite reasonable to suppose that the current generation of adult farmers and older farmers, when they were young, they also had some idea of a better non-farming future, at least if they had access to formal education. This was certainly the case with the young teenage boys and girls I studied in that village in the early 1970s, and who are now farmers, and the parents and grandparents of the children who you see in the slide. Our aspirations are no guide to our actual futures. When I was a teenager, I knew that whatever I would become, I would never be a teacher. My father was a teacher, and he wanted to be a researcher. My mother was a school teacher, and she wanted to be an actress. I rest my case. Mizuna, what did you want to be when you were in high school? Rural schools are one place, not the only place, where rural life is consistently downgraded and children are taught to aspire to urban lives and office jobs. In fact, we can probably say that wanting not to be a farmer has been a constant in the lives of the children of smallholders, and sometimes an aspiration of parents for their children, ever since rural children started going to school, or at least since they started going to secondary school, as nearly all children in the Southeast Asian region do today. But when we look in detail at the same multi-country surveys that I mentioned, and when these surveys have asked more concretely, what would make farming an attractive option for you? Farming does emerge as a possible option, but only if certain conditions are fulfilled. Land and inputs have to be available. Farming has to be at least partly commercially oriented, and it has to be combined with other income sources in pluriactive livelihoods. This is a very sensible aspiration, as I can explain later, particularly in the context of climate change. Young people's desire for an independent economic existence is strong, and they express a clear understanding of the many constraints which make access to land and successful farming difficult or impossible, at least while they are still young. So it's not surprising that so many young rural people, after leaving school, decide to migrate in search of both incomes and independence, rather than hanging around in the village, helping their parents on the farm, waiting for their parents to die so they can get hold of the farm. But this does not mean that they will never become farmers. When researchers have undertaken more detailed local qualitative studies of young people in the Southeast Asian region, a more complex view emerges, which is a corrective to any assumptions that there will be no new generation of young people to engage in revitalized future smallholder-based farming. In southern Laos, for example, a region where there's rapid expansion of large monoculture plantations, many young people migrate to the cities for temporary jobs, but they tend later to return to the village, where it's now possible for them, because of infrastructure development, to seek out and to enact rural modern lifestyles, something also very important for today's young people. They may not be interested in long periods of unpaid work on their parents' farms, but they still envisage farming as a likely occupation in future, even if it's not their first or ideal choice. And in the Philippines, in Aurora and Albay provinces, despite the universal desire of young people to acquire a college degree and the expectation that most of them will migrate, permanent migration is also not a preferred option. The great majority of young people have positive perceptions of farming and expect to return and acquire land, whether to farm themselves or to provide farming opportunities for their poorer relatives. In northeastern Thailand, Jonathan Rigg and his colleagues argue, we can no longer, if we ever could, neatly classify rural people, young or old, as farmers or non-farmers. They move constantly between the two sectors. And if we characterize them as labor statistics, population statistics do, as having only one occupation, this obscures the pluriactive, multifunctional nature of rural households today. It may be that old men or women are the only ones who describe themselves and go into the statistics as farmers, so find themselves in a table like this, but they run their farms with the part-time help of their children and grandchildren, who are both spatially and sectorally mobile, but return to the village when help is needed. And they argue that across rural developing Asia, this is something normal rather than exceptional. I don't know if you are visitors to Jakarta and if you took a taxi sometime yesterday, it's very likely the driver was from Tegal or Pekalongan in the north of central Java. And if you ask these taxi drivers, do you plan to return to the village? Yes, yes. I'm saving money. I've already bought a piece of land. When I have one more piece of land, and I want to build a fish pond and grow mushrooms, and then I will go back to the farm. Almost always. In this Javanese village that I showed on the first slide, and I will come back to it, I promise, we recently interviewed 35 young men and women farmers. Could we have the next slide, please? Oh, sorry, after that. One more. Yes, here are two of them. The young woman farmer and the young, this is the youngest farmer we could find, he's 21 years old. Only a small handful of these 35 had no experience of out-migration before they made a start in farming. So the typical young farmer is an ex-migrant and pluriactive. So both of these have activities on the farm and outside the farm to build up a multiple livelihood. So this points to the importance of seeing this generational problem in agriculture in a perspective of the life course, not in terms of once for all decisions to be a farmer or not to be a farmer. So all this suggests that we need to look beyond prevailing narratives that rural youth today are not interested in farming. They underline the importance of a life course perspective in the study of young people and their move out of and perhaps later back into farming. Young rural men and women in this region are potentially a powerful force in the revitalization of smallholder farming. A serious commitment to smallholder farming futures means, first of all, substantial government support to smallholders and provision and protection of their access to emerging markets and to the value added that is generated not only on the farm, but in the upstream and downstream activities in agri-food chains. It means curbing and, if necessary, reversing corporate land grabs and the near monopolies of large-scale agribusiness, including, where necessary, grabbing land back, hopefully in orderly ways, through local or national agrarian reforms. Within this general agenda, A generationally sustainable revitalization of smallholder farming means recognizing young people not as instruments of development and growth, but as subjects, actors, and citizens whose voice should be heard. Initiatives aiming to support them should take into account the character of their trajectories today, their multi-directional mobility, and their desire for pluriactive livelihoods combining farm and non-farm income. It means providing land and other resources to young men and women would-be farmers, while respecting the interests and needs of the older generation. It also means creative investment in rural infrastructures, making rural areas attractive places for young men and women to live and work. The next one, please. Finally, I promised to come back to this photo which I showed at the beginning. In all Indonesian villages, there are youth groups called Karang Taruna. These groups are expected to be active, organizing sports, preparing for the National Independence Day festivities, etc. It's a way to keep young people busy and out of trouble, basically. But 3 years ago, in one corner of this village, the local Karang Taruna, you saw them in the meeting in the slide before, they decided to rent some land from the village government and to plant rice collectively as a source of income. And these teenagers, who, as I said, in most cases they had never helped their parents in the fields, they came in large groups to plant the rice, to weed it, and next one, to harvest it. And despite their lack of experience, their first harvest was just the same as that of the neighboring farmers. And they're now into the 5th planting season and looking for other opportunities to earn some income together. This gives me some reason for optimism that it's not farming or rural life as such that young rural women and men are allergic to. They don't want to spend their young adulthood helping their parents in the position of dependency, and maybe in future they don't want to farm in the same ways that their parents do. But they, or at least some of them, are willing to consider other styles of farming for the future. In this short presentation, I've only been able to scratch the surface of the complex links between class, gender, and generational relations in agrarian households and communities. But I hope to have shown the relevance and importance of a generational angle in the study of agrarian change and sustainable agricultural futures. Thank you very much.